Afternoon, it's a pleasure to be able to speak to you all today about our project here at Avoncroft. My presentation is divided into three short sections. So firstly, the focus of the project, the Showman's living wagon and its history. Secondly, the motivation for the project, forming new connections and engaging with stakeholders. And thirdly, how we developed a multi-sensory fairground themed exhibition within the constraints of the space. So the project centres around a showman's wagon in our collection, built by George Orton, a renowned coach builder for a local showman named Tom Clarke in 1910. It's a beautiful, elaborate wagon with detailed etched glass, rich Spanish mahogany furnishings, and hand-painted ceilings. The wagon served as both a family home and a business office for Tom Clarke and his family. Tom is pictured standing to the bottom left with his wife Eliza in the centre and his daughter Lily to the right. The family travelled in the wagon to fairs throughout the Midlands, along with their rides and attractions. And it remained in the family's possession in Redditch up to the 1980s, but by this stage, there was growing concern about plans to develop the town and proposals to requisition the family's yard. As such, Avoncroft was approached regarding a donation. The wagon was subsequently gifted to the museum in 1986 and stored in our threshing barn on site, which was the only building large enough to house it. The wagon's restoration was largely overseen by Simon Harris, a journeyman wheelwright pictured, Stuart Meese, an art conservator who restored all of the interior hand-painted ceilings and panelling, and Graham Hopkins, a coach painter who completed the exterior lining. Whilst the restoration was being undertaken, a purpose-built building was constructed to house it and ensure it was appropriately cared for. So what was the motivation for the project? How did we form new connections and engage with stakeholders? Following my appointment in early 2022, I was taken on a site tour by the director. And as part of this walk around, I was led into this nondescript building pictured to be shown a collection of bricks. And I'm sure you can appreciate my expectations were low. But upon entering, I was immediately presented with this beautiful, elaborate wagon, and I was immediately captivated. I quickly formed the view that the wagon was underutilised, inadvertently hidden away, stored amongst unrelated collections items, including a large firefighter's curricle, which is pictured in the bottom right-hand corner and actually takes up the entirety of the space behind the wagon. In an otherwise wide and static space with limited and dated interpretation. I wanted to discover more about the broader context in which it sat, the history, traditions, and way of life of a unique community, Showpeople. A community that has made a significant contribution to the cultural landscape of this country, but one that is nonetheless underrepresented, misunderstood, and frequently the victim of discrimination and prejudice. With the support of volunteers, I began to survey visitors and capture their views on a host of areas, including on the wagon and the building it is housed, the existing interpretation, their understanding of showmen and fairgrounds, and what they would like to see introduced as part of a future interpretation project. And these surveys helped to reaffirm my views, inform our project proposal, and strengthen our subsequent funding bid. I also began to undertake preliminary research, reaching out to organisations such as the National Fairground and Circus Archive and the Fairground Heritage Trust, making new and valuable connections. As well as related individuals, including Fairground historian Graham Downey, who was previously part of the Council of Management at Avoncroft, and influential in the decision to acquire the wagon, and members of Tom Clarke's family, including Norma Wilson, Tom Clarke's niece, who grew up in the wagon. It was clear that there was a significant interest amongst visitors in the wagon and a desire to discover more about the showman community. So I began to identify funders before applying for the Association of Independent Museums New Stories, New Audiences grant. AIM provided grants of up to £15,000 for projects that involved identifying a new narrative, collaborating with a new partner, and experimenting with new, innovative approaches to storytelling and audience engagement, all of which closely aligned with our project aims. We applied for the full £15,000 available with our project application outlining our aims, our partner, and the associated costs. Through our connection with the National Fairground and Circus Archive, I met Sheldon Chadwick, 7th generation showman, founder and chair of the Showman's Mental Health Awareness Charity, and PhD student on the subject of showman identity. Sheldon was subsequently commissioned as a cultural broker between the museum and the community. And Sheldon played a very important role, particularly as many travelling communities have experienced discrimination and prejudice and are therefore naturally cautious and wary of outsiders. He also supported with undertaking oral histories, developing and chairing focus group meetings, and content development. The surveys we had undertaken reaffirmed a number of issues, including that the building was poorly signposted. As part of our plan to address this, we commissioned a fairground artist, Amy Goodwin, pictured, who produced a 10-foot by 5-foot hand-painted sign for the exterior of the building, inspired by the colourways and design of the wagon. And fairground art is also an endangered craft, with only 10 commercial fairground artists remaining in the UK. So it was very rewarding to be able to commission one of these artists to work with us on this project. And here is a photo of the sign being produced in Amy's studio. In addition to the sign, Amy also produced 8 bespoke hand-painted background panel designs that were subsequently used for the interpretation panels to try to create an authentic fairground-themed experience, as well as the titles for each of these, which are also hand-lettered and painted. For our connections with the Fairground Heritage Trust, we also acquired a set of historic swing boats that originally belonged to Tom Clarke, the original owner of the Wagon, as well as securing a long-term loan of 38 fairground signs, ensuring they could continue to be enjoyed by members of the public following Dingle's closure in late 2024. In addition to acquiring new items for the exhibition, we also sought to integrate existing related and hidden collections, including a large fairground model built by John and Ken Tarleton from Redditch. The various rides and attractions pictured here are made from everyday recycled household items, including cardboard packaging and tin cans, and they depict rides from the 1880s to the 1960s, many of which were seen by the brothers whilst visiting fairs throughout the Midlands. The model was donated to Avoncroft in the early 1990s with the intention of displaying it alongside the Showman's Wagon. Unfortunately, it went into storage where it suffered deterioration. As you can see from the images, it's quite heavily damaged at this stage. As part of this project, it was restored by professional fairground model maker and restorer Doug Roseman. The National Fairground and Circus Archive also kindly agreed to provide high-resolution photographs of their archival material free of charge, which will be used to create an AV of Midlands fairs throughout time. Another significant aspect of the project during the development phase was engaging with the community. So Sheldon and I undertook 25 interviews with showmen, capturing their personal stories and recollections. We subsequently segmented these and decided on the 8 themes we would incorporate into the oral history section of the exhibition. And we also held focus group meetings with 10 members of the community to determine the 5 key themes for the interpretation panels. So the final stage was bringing these elements together to transform the previous dated and underwhelming space into a multi-sensory fairground-themed exhibition that told the story of the showman community. Firstly, Amy Goodwin's sign, inspired by Tom Clarke's Wagon, was installed on the exterior of the building, along with a speaker, which enabled us to play fairground organ music. These served to raise awareness of the building and the wagon, set the scene and raise expectations, and create a visitor journey. Sounds that you can hear on approach to the building now. Quite nice. As visitors enter the space, they encounter historic fairground signage, as well as the decorative timbers from Tim Clarke's swing boats that have been incorporated into the display. Just above the entrance is a concealed scent dispenser that emits the smells of candy floss, which serves to create a sensory experience and evoke the feeling of a traditional fairground within the space. The first interpretation panel visitors encounter is of the Showman's Wagon panel, and this has been designed to mirror the colourway and design of the wagon, with the title A Palace on Wheels, inspired by one of the comments of Tom Clarke's descendants during one of our oral history interviews. The text for the panel was restricted to 150 words, but additional content can be accessed via the integrated QR codes that can be found on all of the new panels. The QR codes also enable people with visual impairments to access an audio version of the text, making the content more inclusive. Throughout the project, we committed to enhancing accessibility whilst working within the constraints of the space. So the wagon itself cannot be accessed as we need to preserve it, but a toughened glass partition has been installed, which enables us to fully open the stable door, improving visibility for both children and visitors in wheelchairs. In addition to the new panel for the wagon, we also introduced 5 additional main interpretation panels focused on Showman. Starting with It's All a Show, which was inspired by Sheldon Chadwick's exhibition at Sheffield University, and which explores showman identity. Cattle and Sheep to Swing Boats and Roundabouts, which explores the evolution of market and trading fairs into the fun fair. Taking a Stand, which focuses on discrimination and prejudice and the resulting formation of the Van Dwellers Protection Association, which later became the Showman's Guild. Life on the Road, which explores the evolution of living arrangements. And finally, Changing Times, which reflects on the community today and the challenges they face in a continuously changing world. As well as new interpretation panels, we've also installed interactive elements, including this push-button model of Tom Clarke's switchback motor ride, which was donated to the museum during the project, as well as a buzzwire and a children's high striker. We also created a designated oral history section. The 8 themes on this panel, including identity, community, and discrimination and prejudice, contain personal stories from 25 members of the Showman community that were interviewed for the project. The panels pictured contain inbuilt speakers, and the stories are played at random when someone presses a pulsating coloured button. And I'll just play one of those short stories for you now.
As a traveller, I never made it known to any of my employers or in interviews or anything that I was from a traveller background. The only time I have is like when I feel like I can trust them, that they won't judge me based on my background. So I think it's usually like about a year into an employment contract that I'll then share that information, when I've kind of proven myself that they want to keep me, X, Y, Z, because you just don't know what they're going to think, what their experiences might be with other travelling groups. So it's easiest just to not say anything until you have to.
Many of the signs loaned from the Fairground Heritage Trust have also been used to form a display wall of gag tags within the space, which is particularly impactful. And 2 TV screens have been carefully and enclosed within gold elaborate frames, displaying a slideshow of archival images from our collection and the National Fairground and Circus archives. One focuses on Tom Clarke, his wagon rides and fairs, and the other on Midlands fairs through time. And lastly, the restored fairground model is finally on display alongside the wagon 35 years after it was donated. So on a rather modest budget, working with the constraints of the existing building, we managed to transform the dated, tired and largely static space into a multi-sensory experience that incorporates first-hand accounts from the community, previously hidden collections and archival material, original artworks, hands-on interactive elements, and even associated smells and sounds, all of which hopefully serve to tell the story of Showpeople in an engaging and accessible manner. And this layered approach that's been adopted for this project will serve as a framework for our future approach to storytelling, with a commitment to delivering stories that engage with contemporary issues, that resonate with diverse audiences, and that deliver social impact. So I whizzed through that, hopefully within the 15 minutes allocated, and I'm now open to any questions that anyone has.
Fantastic, thank you, Stephen. And what a transformation to go from that, yeah, as you say, incredibly static, but also very tired looking, to something that is utterly engaging and yet really tackles quite challenging themes as well. Did anyone have any questions that they'd like to raise?
Well, I noticed that the when you were talking about the craftsmanship with the artwork, that we had recently collected an item from a gypsy traveller, which had been, you know, recently restored, and it was so similar to a lot of the things that you're showing. And I was just wondering about the craftsmanship crossover between Showman and Travellers, and maybe even did you look into the actual social crossover? Because I know that Showman were sort of a separate group, but there was crossover.
Yeah, so I mean, as I talked about the oral history interviews, one of the subjects that came up quite frequently was the fact that, you know, they're all lumped into this sort of umbrella term of traveller, and actually they've all got distinct cultures and identities. So that was something that did come out through the conversations that I had with the community, and that was particularly interesting.
Yeah, I'd always know, because I actually did some work for the Fairground Heritage Trust some years ago when they were trying for British Lottery grant. And I found that there's little cultural crossover between traveller community and fairground community. Although some of the sort of craftsmanship and things is very similar, but I always saw that each community had their own identity and almost stuck to it in a very proud manner. You know, I'm a showman, I'm not.
Yeah, that's right. And it's not in a sort of disparaging way. You know, that came across quite strongly in the interviews. It's just that they have their own distinct culture and identity. As you say, George, they're particularly proud of that, and don't want to be sort of labelled as just a generic sort of traveller, in that broader explanation that people give of travellers. So
yeah, because I think the other thing is that there's very distinctive makers of the accommodation. Alton and Spooner, or Alton, yours, were very. I don't think they did much on the traveller side, but they were fairground makers. You know, they made animals for carousels and such like as well. So they were very strongly showman.
Yeah, George Alton started as a carriage and coach builder, and then Spooner was the sort of wood carver who did a lot of the more sort of decorative work involved.
Yeah.
Any other
the role that Sheldon played, and it sounds like it was it's quite instrumental into being able to access a community that may feel slightly ill at ease speaking to a museum potentially. Do you think that was kind of such a key contact to have?
Yeah, absolutely. Sheldon was invaluable, really, particularly when you consider the project had really tight time frame in terms of delivery, 12 months, in order to kind of build those relationships. Trying to do that as an outsider, I just don't think would have been feasible. We wouldn't have been able to do justice to the project if I tried to do it solely from a museum's perspective without Sheldon's involvement. So yeah, he was absolutely critical to the project and the delivery. Was there a second part to that question? Sorry.
No, I think you've covered it. I do have another question. I sort of followed this obviously through quite a lot of your social media content. So I was kind of going, oh, this looks really interesting. It was great to reach out to you. And I saw that obviously quite a lot of the community then engaged with the opening event, and we're obviously kind of seeing it through to fruition. And I wondered if there were plans to kind of keep that relationship going. I know you've got lots of other amazing things at Avoncroft that I'm sure you're itching to work on, but whether there was any
yeah, I'm still in touch with Sheldon, who's like, I would class him as a friend actually. He's become quite close to him, and I've noticed Zoe's on this meeting, and perhaps she can talk a little bit about plans involving broader projects.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And can I just say, as Stephen's boss and director of Avoncroft, I'm thrilled to bits and really proud of what Stephen's achieved so collaboratively with others and really, really transformed the space. What doesn't come across in a slideshow is that music you can hear from the moment you approach the entranceway from the car park.
Yeah.
It probably drives us a little bit mad after a while, but it really does draw people into the space. And also, just to emphasize the interactive elements within the space, whether it's crowded or there's just a few people in there, you know, just something simple like that buzz wire, it elicits laughter, it elicits fun, and you can really see how people are, you know, reminiscing about experiences at fairgrounds and things like that. So it's really accessible to everybody. It's not just a community talking to a community. It's really telling the stories and bringing them out to the wider audience. And I think it's also really thought-provoking. So a lot of the oral history selections on that board, which obviously could be updated in due course, but it's really been thought-provoking to understand, you know, yes, it's an Orton and Spooner rather magnificent art exhibit, the Wagon, but it's somebody's home. And you get a lot of personal stories about what it means and what home is to a seasonal travelling community. And a lot of them were identifying with the rides and the carriages more than their sort of bricks and mortar homes, as that was what their sense of home was. In terms of it not being a one-off project where we've had this engagement and now we've done it and we move on, I was talking to Steven sort of throughout the project, and I was in parallel. We've got a cultural compact locally, which is about sort of collaboration between lots of different heritage and cultural organisations in our local district. And there was an application going on for some funding, which was successful. And the work that Steven was doing was actually part of that inspired one of the strands of the project that we're planning to do in the community over the next couple of years as a cultural compact. So it's not just Avoncroft, it is the local area. And that is about a strand of work getting out to the carnivals in the local area and particularly engaging young people with carnivals, with art, and so on. So it's yet to be formulated in exactly what form it goes, but I think it was quite a strong thing that Steven and I discussed, that this element of the project, or this project, this AIM-funded project, was a way of going out, collecting stories and bringing them onto display in the museum. But actually, this next step is about taking those stories back out into the community and spreading them more widely, so that we're not hard and fast gatekeepers of any of these stories. You know, the whole point of this is actually to spread the word and spread awareness and understanding.
Sounds incredibly exciting, so please do keep us informed on how you get on with that project as well. Maddie.
Thanks. Yeah, that was a really good talk, and it looks amazing, the transformation of the final exhibit. And it sounds like you did a lot of research and gathered stories and a lot of interactive elements. But is there anything that you left out that you feel like that it could lead to another project, like Zoe was saying, or is there anything like you want to update or change?
The one frustration was that although you say it was sort of heavily researched and lots of engagement, I felt that was quite rushed actually because of the time frame. And it's something that I've fed back to funders, that, you know, you get 12 months at the point of being allocated funding to then do all this engagement, do all the fit out, all the expenditure, all the report. And actually, if you want meaningful engagement with the community and to do something in co-creation, you actually need longer than that. So yeah, that I would like to have done more, even though it's on the surface seems heavily researched. I think we could have done more engagement with the community and captured more stories. But the other difficulty was the constraints of the space. We had to work with the existing space, and it's quite limited in terms of size. And actually, arguably, the Wagon isn't best presented within that space. It's quite a tight fitting space. So ideally, we would have a bigger space for it. But we have to work within the constraints of the existing building and the budget that we've got. So largely, though, I think it's when I submitted the application and I look back on that, actually we delivered everything that we said we were going to deliver and more. And there were times when I was a bit worried and thought that perhaps we wouldn't do that, but actually it all worked out quite well in the end. So, yeah.
And a follow up to that. So it's great that you've got like the online labels as well. And do you know how people are interacting with those? Do you get any kind of count, like number counting or anything like that from that?
Yeah,
digital?
We do. I'm going to be honest, I need to engage with that a bit more. I haven't had time to sort of follow up and see what level of engagement there is. But yes, we can track that. And one of the things that I didn't show is there's a panel, basically a credit panel where you exit the building with a QR code on that. And that's basically links to a survey for people to kind of feedback on what they thought worked, what didn't work. So that can influence our future approach to interpretation projects. Because I think sometimes internally you have an idea of what people want, but actually without engaging with our visitors, we're just making good assumptions. So, yeah. But yeah, going back to what you said, we can track it. I haven't tracked it as of yet, and that will probably prompt me to do that actually. So thank you.
No worries.
To be fair, it's only been open since April, so
yeah. I mean, the QR stuff, because I wanted to restrict the text panels to kind of, there are some that go up to 175 words, but largely 150 words. I didn't want copious amounts of text, particularly because it's such a small space. But for those who do engage with QR codes, it's not just about accessibility and getting an audio version of that if you've got visual impairments. There's actually a lot of additional content behind those QR codes. So yeah, it'd be hopefully people do engage with them, but I haven't had time to sort of actively observe that or track it as of yet.
I presume you've from the research you've got a bit of a research archive for the museum. Is there any capacity to not actively increase it, but passively increase it if people sort of come to you with more information, want to talk to you?
Yeah, I mean, the information that we had was largely about Tom Clarke and the Wagon itself, and a little bit about Orton and Spooner. That's why collaboration with external parties such as the Fairground Heritage Trust and the Fairground and Circus Archive was so important. And actually, they were really helpful because they've got a lot of the archives, they've got a lot of the research, and we weren't having to reinvent the wheel in such a sort of, as I said earlier, quite a limited time frame for delivery. So we do have archival images and broader archives related to fairgrounds, but there's a designated archive for that, and I wouldn't look to sort of replace that really.
Yeah.
There's that option because you've worked so closely with them. You can direct, if there are things that come your way, you can direct them appropriately to the National Archives.
Yeah, some of the lessons that I learned actually was, as Zoe will know, I kind of was captivated with this Wagon from day one, and I did then do a bit of preliminary work. I met a rancer at the National Fairground and Circus Archive. I was introduced to people like Sheldon before we even got the funding. So I was kind of ahead of the curve that way. I think if I hadn't have done that in retrospect, I wouldn't have been able to deliver the project within the time frame available, because it was such a tight time frame. In and amongst, as everyone is probably aware, museum sector, under-resourced, doing lots of different jobs, it just wouldn't have been feasible, I don't think.
Fantastic. Any further questions for Stephen this afternoon?
Has there been any impact from AIM on the wider implications of the project? Because it seems to me it's an excellent project that really does what AIM was wanting to do with its funding. And it would be good to know if there's feedback from that into the wider AIM community.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think in previous years, AIM funded this project, but this particular grant, which is New Stories, New Audiences, is the final cohort. They're not running it again. And previous cohorts, they've had case studies that have then featured in the Museums Association's journal, etc. So like highlighted projects from that particular cohort. And my understanding was that they were going to do that for this cohort, but it hasn't yet materialized. I haven't yet given up hope that we may be one of the case studies, but we'll see.
I think it would be very useful if AIM could be persuaded to do that.
Yeah. Again, that's quite useful comment because that can prompt me to follow up with the relevant individuals. Thank you.
And if I can say again, it's not just us blowing our trumpet. When we had the launch event, Sheldon, who you know was the broker, if you like, he gave a very impassioned speech that from his perspective, this was one of you know, the most successfully co-created exhibitions that he's come across, because you know, it's a lot harder to do than it is to think about doing. And you know, Sheldon felt very much that the Showman community voice had very much helped to frame the collection, the exhibition. So you know, I think it would make an excellent case study for how to do things. And as Stephen says, some of that is about being prepared in advance and actually making those connections perhaps in advance, and that's something that maybe again needs to be recognised in the funding structures, that you actually have to invest that time and that resource up front.
I think, you know, obviously they want to see an impact and they need to have a time frame, but if you're funding a project and there's a real emphasis on co-creation with a community that is underrepresented, well, actually 12 months isn't an awful lot of time when you consider, you know, all of the different elements that have to go into a project delivery. And you know, if you're a small to medium-sized museum with limited resources, which we are, you know, we don't have a project officer or someone coming in to support with that. It's delivered in the house with existing resources. So that's something I did feedback, but I'm one person, so I don't know how influential I am, but I have fed that back nonetheless.
No, that's really important to bear in mind, particularly with these sorts of funding opportunities. But yeah, absolutely something you should be rightfully proud of, and I'm so pleased you were able to share a case study with us today, as it were. So we've at least got a fantastic understanding of the work that you've been involved in and the future opportunities as well. I'll do a final call for any further queries or any questions, but if
I am happy. As I said earlier,
Stephen, yes.
So if anyone wants my email address or has any questions, feel free to contact me directly. That's absolutely fine. And thank you once again for inviting me to talk today. Very much appreciated.
Really
Superb.
interesting.
Thank you, everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.